The night I saved a stranger's life, I thought the most valuable thing he owned was the watch on his wrist. I had no idea it was the city itself. Rain hammered against the restaurant windows hard enough to blur the Chicago skyline into streaks of silver and gold. It was nearly midnight, and Romano's diner was running on fumes. The dinner rush had ended an hour ago. The coffee machine hissed quietly behind the counter. Half the lights were already off. My feet ached. My back hurt. And I was calculating whether I could afford groceries and my mother's prescription refill in the same week. The answer was probably no. Again. I balanced a tray of dirty plates and headed toward the kitchen. The smell of coffee, grilled steak, and wet pavement lingered in the air. Outside, rainwater rushed along the curb in steady streams. Inside, only a handful of customers remained. Most were regulars. Truck drivers. Night shift workers. People like me. Then the front door opened. Cold air swept through the diner. Every head turned. 3 men entered first. Expensive suits. Expensive shoes. The kind of people who never looked at menu prices. A 4th man followed behind them. Taller. Broader. Quieter. Something about him changed the atmosphere immediately. He wore a dark charcoal coat over a black suit. His expression revealed nothing. Yet everyone seemed to notice him. Even without understanding why. He took a booth near the windows. The other men sat nearby. Not with him. Around him. Like planets orbiting a sun. I grabbed a coffee pot and walked over. "Can I get you something?" I asked. The tall man glanced up briefly. Gray eyes. Sharp features. Calm confidence. Black coffee. His voice was low and controlled. I poured his coffee and returned to work. Still, I found myself looking toward his booth more often than necessary. Not because he was handsome. Although he was. Not because he was rich. Although that seemed obvious. It was because he looked exhausted. Truly exhausted. Like someone carrying a weight nobody else could see. 20 minutes passed. Rain continued tapping against the glass. One of the suited men said something that made the others laugh. The tall man did not. He rubbed his temple and stared out the window. Then everything changed. At first, I thought he had dropped something. His coffee cup tipped sideways. The dark liquid spread across the table. One of the men stood abruptly. Another called his name. The tall man reached for the edge of the booth as though trying to steady himself. Then he collapsed back against the seat. The entire diner froze. For one terrible second, nobody moved. People stared. Whispered. Panicked. I did not think. I ran. The tray slipped from my hands and crashed onto the floor behind me. Glass shattered. Someone shouted. I reached the booth first. His skin looked pale beneath the restaurant lights. His breathing sounded wrong. One of the suited men grabbed his phone with shaking hands. Call an ambulance, another yelled. I was already reaching for the emergency number. Rain pounded the windows. Sirens had not arrived yet. The stranger's expensive watch glimmered beneath the lights as I held onto his hand and prayed help would come in time. Then one of the men looked directly at me. His face had gone completely white. "Do you even know who this is?" he asked. The question hung in the air while rain battered the diner windows. I looked at the man lying in the booth and shook my head. No. The suited man stared at me as though I had just admitted I could not recognize the mayor. Another siren echoed somewhere in the distance. Closer this time. "His name is Vincent Romano," he said quietly. The name meant nothing to me. At least not then. I was too focused on the way Vincent's breathing sounded. Too focused on the fact that help had not arrived yet. "I do not care who he is," I said. "I care that he needs a hospital." For a second, Nobody spoke. Then the front doors burst open. Paramedics rushed inside carrying equipment and a stretcher. The diner exploded into motion. Questions. Instructions. Radios crackling. One medic knelt beside Vincent while another checked his vital signs. Their expressions changed almost immediately. Not panic. Concern. Serious concern. "We need to move now," one of them said. The men who arrived with Vincent stepped aside. For the first time since he collapsed, I felt my heart begin to slow. He was alive. That was all that mattered. Then one of the paramedics turned toward me. "You called?" I nodded. "You are coming with us." My eyes widened. "What?" "You are the primary witness. We need information." Before I could argue, they were already moving Vincent toward the ambulance. The storm hit me the second I stepped outside. Cold rain soaked my uniform almost instantly. Red and blue lights reflected across the wet pavement. The city felt louder than ever. I climbed into the ambulance and sat near the rear doors while paramedics worked around Vincent. Machines beeped softly. Rain hammered against the roof. The entire vehicle smelled faintly of antiseptic and wet fabric. I looked at the unconscious stranger lying a few feet away. Up close, he seemed different. Less intimidating. Less powerful. Just human. A tired man having the worst night of his life. One of the medics asked questions about what happened. I answered everything I could remember. The coffee. The conversation. The sudden collapse. As we sped through downtown Chicago, another paramedic reviewed information on a tablet. His expression darkened. Interesting. The other medic looked over. What? Preliminary findings. He lowered his voice. This does not look natural. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. What does that mean? The medic hesitated. Then he looked at me. It means if he arrived 5 minutes later, this could have ended very differently. My stomach dropped. 5 minutes. Just 5. Outside, city lights flashed across the ambulance windows. Inside, the machines continued their steady rhythm. I stared at Vincent and wondered what kind of life waited for him when he woke up. Powerful people always seemed untouchable from a distance. Yet here he was. Vulnerable. Unconscious. Dependent on strangers. As the hospital came into view ahead of us, one of the suited men received a phone call. He listened for several seconds. Then his face turned completely pale. Slowly, he looked from Vincent to me. "Miss Brooks," he said. "You may have just saved the most feared man in Chicago. I did not sleep when I got home. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashing ambulance lights reflecting off rain-soaked streets. I saw the unconscious man in the back of the ambulance. I heard the medic's voice repeating the same sentence over and over in my head. The most feared man in Chicago. By 6 in the morning, I was sitting at my tiny kitchen table drinking coffee that had already gone cold. My mother was still asleep in the next room. Medical bills covered half the table. Rent notices covered the other half. None of that had changed overnight. Yet somehow everything felt different. Around noon, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I almost ignored it. Almost. "Hello?" Silence lasted for a second. Then a professional voice answered. "Miss Brooks?" "Yes." Mr. Romano regained consciousness this morning. I sat up straighter. "Is he okay?" The caller paused, as though surprised by the question. "He is stable." Relief flooded through me before I could stop it. I barely knew the man. Yet knowing he was alive felt strangely important. "Thank you for telling me. Actually, Miss Brooks, there is another reason for the call." My stomach tightened. "What reason?" "Mr. Romano wishes to meet you." The coffee cup nearly slipped from my hand. Me. Immediately. The line went quiet. I stared at the phone after the call ended. Every instinct told me to say no. Powerful men did not request meetings with waitresses. Not in my world. Not in any world I understood. Yet 3 hours later, I found myself standing in the lobby of one of the most expensive private hospitals in Chicago. Marble floors stretched beneath crystal lighting. Fresh flowers filled every corner. Everything smelled expensive. Even the air felt expensive. A security guard escorted me upstairs. As the elevator climbed, my nerves climbed with it. The doors opened onto a private floor. Not a room. A floor. 2 men in dark suits stood outside a set of double doors. They exchanged a glance when they saw me. Then one of them opened the door. Vincent Romano sat near a large window overlooking the city skyline. Afternoon sunlight spilled across the room. He wore a dark sweater instead of a hospital gown. Somehow he still looked intimidating. The monitors beside him hummed quietly. He turned his head when I entered. Those same grey eyes settled on me. Sharp. Observant. Completely awake now. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Vincent did something unexpected. He stood. Every person in the room immediately looked nervous. Vincent ignored them. He walked directly toward me. Hannah Brooks. His voice sounded stronger than it had in the diner. Yes. He studied me carefully. Not rudely. Almost curiously. You stayed. I blinked. What? At the diner. In the ambulance. Most people would not have. I shrugged awkwardly. Someone needed help. A faint expression crossed his face. Not quite a smile. Not quite disbelief. Something in between. Do you know how many people were in that diner? No. 32. His gaze never left mine. You were the only one who ran toward me. The room became very quiet. Then Vincent reached into the pocket of his sweater and placed something on the table between us. A folded piece of paper. I need you to answer one question honestly, he said. My pulse quickened. What question? Vincent looked directly into my eyes. Why did you save a stranger when everyone else stepped back? For a moment, I thought he was joking. The question seemed so simple. So obvious. Yet the way Vincent watched me made it feel important. As though my answer mattered more than anything else in the room. I glanced toward the window overlooking the city. Cars moved like streams of light far below. People rushed through their lives without knowing that one of the most powerful men in Chicago was waiting for a waitress to explain kindness. Finally, I looked back at him. Because somebody had to. Vincent remained silent. That is it, he asked. That is it. I shrugged. You were in trouble. I helped. His expression hardened slightly. Not with anger. With confusion. You did not know who I was. No. You did not know whether helping me would benefit you. No. You could have walked away. I laughed softly. I could have. The room grew quiet again. Then something unexpected happened. Vincent looked away first. As though my answer unsettled him. Most people do not think that way. I smiled. Sadly. Maybe they do. Maybe they just get scared. His gaze returned to mine. And you were not scared. The truth slipped out before I could stop it. I was terrified. For the first time, a real smile appeared on his face. Small. Brief. Genuine. It changed him completely. The cold, intimidating businessman disappeared for a second. In his place stood a man who looked almost humanly exhausted. Thank you for being honest, he said. Then he pushed the folded paper toward me. I opened it carefully. My eyes widened. The number printed on the check was larger than my annual income. Much larger. I stared at it in disbelief. Vincent, you saved my life. I did not do it for money. I know. Then why are you giving me this? His answer came immediately. Because gratitude should have weight. I slowly folded the check and placed it back on the table. I cannot accept it. The room froze. One of the men near the door actually blinked. Vincent studied me carefully. You can. No. I pushed it toward him. I cannot. Silence stretched between us. I expected him to insist. Powerful people were used to hearing yes. Instead, Vincent leaned back slightly and watched me. Most people would have taken it. Most people have bills smaller than mine. The answer surprised even me. For a second, his eyes narrowed with curiosity. You need the money. I laughed. That might be the easiest question anyone has ever asked me. His smile returned briefly. Then it disappeared. Tell me. I hesitated. Nobody had asked me that question in a long time. Not seriously. Yet somehow I found myself talking. About the apartment. About working double shifts. About helping my mother after her medical problems forced her to stop working. About choosing between groceries and prescription some months. Vincent listened without interrupting. Not once. When I finally finished, the room felt strangely quiet. He looked down at the untouched check. Then back at me. And despite all of that, he said softly, you still stopped to help a stranger. I did not know how to answer. Because to me, that part was normal. What happened next was not. Vincent reached for his phone. He read a message. Instantly, every trace of warmth vanished from his expression. The atmosphere in the room changed. One of the men near the door stepped forward. Vincent stood slowly. His grey eyes hardened. Then he looked at me and said something that sent a chill through my entire body. Miss Brooks, it appears your life may have become more complicated because you chose to save mine. The drive home felt longer than usual. Vincent's final words followed me through every red light and every rain-soaked intersection. My life may have become more complicated because I chose to save his. I tried to convince myself he was exaggerating. Powerful men often spoke dramatically. By the time I reached my apartment building, I had almost talked myself into believing everything would return to normal. It did not. The next morning began like every other morning. My alarm rang at 6. I checked on my mother. I made coffee. I reviewed the stack of bills sitting beside the refrigerator. Ordinary problems. Familiar problems. The kind I understood. Then I opened my front door and stopped. A large bouquet of white lilies sat on the welcome mat. Fresh. Expensive. Beautiful. A small card rested among the flowers. Thank you for saving my life. Vincent. I stared at the message for several seconds before carrying the arrangement inside. My mother noticed immediately. Those are gorgeous. They are from someone I met at work. Technically true. Someone important. I thought about private hospital floors and security guards. Probably. She smiled knowingly. I changed the subject. At noon, another delivery arrived. This time it was a gift basket filled with specialty foods that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I sent it back. The following day, a luxury spa package appeared. I sent that back too. Then came theater tickets. Returned. A designer handbag. Returned. By the end of the week, I felt like I had developed a second job rejecting expensive gifts. On Friday evening, I arrived at the diner for my shift. The rain had finally stopped. The city glowed beneath clear skies. I tied my apron and stepped behind the counter. You have a visitor, my manager said. My stomach sank. Instantly, Vincent sat alone in a corner booth. The same booth where everything had started. He looked healthier now. Stronger. More alert. Yet his expression carried the same quiet intensity. I walked over cautiously. You know, most people stop after the third rejected gift. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. Most people accept the first one. I sat across from him for a moment. Vincent, why are you doing this? His answer came immediately. Because I owe you. I shook my head. No. His eyebrows lifted. No. You do not owe me anything. He stared at me as though I had spoken a foreign language. Hannah, you saved my life. And I would do it again. The word surprised both of us. Silence settled between us. Soft music played from the diner speakers. Coffee machines hissed in the background. For a second, the world felt strangely calm. Then Vincent leaned forward slightly. Why do you keep refusing everything? I took a slow breath. Because I saved a life. His eyes remained fixed on mine. And? I did not sell my soul. The answer landed harder than I expected. Vincent froze completely. Not angry. Not offended. Thoughtful. Deeply thoughtful. For several seconds, he simply looked at me. Then he nodded once. Slowly. Respectfully. As though he finally understood something important. Unfortunately, the moment did not last. One of his men entered the diner carrying a tablet. He whispered something into Vincent's ear. Instantly, the warmth vanished from Vincent's face. He stood. His gaze moved toward the front windows. Then back to me. Hannah, he said quietly, from this moment forward, I need you to be careful. My pulse quickened. Why? Vincent looked toward the street again. Because someone has been asking questions about the waitress who saved my life. For the next several days, I tried to pretend nothing had changed. I went to work. I checked on my mother. I paid bills that never seemed to get smaller. On the surface, life looked exactly the same. Underneath, it felt completely different. Once you learn that powerful people know your name, ordinary days stop feeling ordinary. Every time my phone rang, I wondered who it might be. Every time a stranger entered the diner, I noticed. Not because I was afraid. Because Vincent's warning refused to leave my mind. Someone had been asking questions about me. On Tuesday afternoon, I finished a double shift and stopped at a small grocery store a few blocks from my apartment. The store was crowded. Shopping carts rattled across the floor. A radio played old country music through ceiling speakers. Everything seemed normal. Then I noticed the same man twice. He stood near the produce section when I arrived. 20 minutes later, he appeared near the checkout lanes. Maybe it was nothing. Probably nothing. Yet a strange feeling settled in my stomach. I paid for my groceries and left quickly. Outside, cold autumn air swept through the street. I walked faster than usual. By the time I reached my apartment building, the feeling had faded. I told myself I was imagining things. That evening, my phone buzzed. Vincent. I stared at the screen before answering. Hello? How was your day? The question caught me off guard. That is why you called. A faint chuckle reached my ear. Am I not allowed to ask? I smiled despite myself. It was fine. Silence lingered briefly. Then his tone changed. Did anything unusual happen? My grip tightened around the phone. Why? Because I asked. I hesitated before mentioning the grocery store. The second I finished, the line became very quiet. Too quiet. Vincent? What did he look like? The question arrived immediately. I described the man as best I could. Vincent listened carefully. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. Hannah. What? Promise me something. My pulse quickened. What kind of promise? If anything feels wrong, call me. I laughed softly. You make it sound like I am some kind of secret agent. You are not. His voice lowered. You are someone who matters. The words hit harder than they should have. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then my apartment buzzer suddenly sounded. I jumped. Someone is at the door. Vincent's tone sharpened instantly. Are you expecting anyone? No. My heart started beating faster. The buzzer sounded again. I walked toward the intercom and looked through the small security camera screen. A delivery driver stood downstairs holding a large package. Relief flooded through me. It is fine, I said. Just a delivery. Yet when I opened the package 10 minutes later, the relief disappeared. Inside sat a single white envelope. No return address. No name. Nothing except one typed sentence placed in the center of the page. Stop helping Vincent Romano. I stared at the message while I spread through my chest. Then my phone rang again. Vincent had not hung up. Somehow, he already knew something was wrong. My hands trembled as I stared at the note. The words were simple. Cold. Deliberate. Stop helping Vincent Romano. Nothing else. No explanation. No signature. Just a message from someone who knew exactly who I was. Hannah. Vincent's voice came through the phone. Talk to me. I swallowed hard. There was a note. Silence. Then, read it. I did. The longer the silence lasted afterward, the worse I felt. Finally, he spoke. Do not throw it away. Vincent, what is happening? I hated how small my voice sounded. I am still trying to find out. That answer did not help. You said someone was asking questions about me. Now someone knows where I live. The reality of it settled over me like a heavy blanket. My apartment suddenly felt different. Smaller. Less safe. Vincent exhaled slowly. Listen carefully. You are not in trouble because of anything you did wrong. That is not exactly comforting. To my surprise, a faint laugh escaped him. Fair point. The sound eased some of the tension in my chest. Just a little. Hannah, I need you to trust me. I looked at the note again. I barely know you. The words slipped out before I could stop them. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Vincent answered quietly. I know. Something about those two words felt unexpectedly honest. The next morning, I woke after barely sleeping. Every sound outside my apartment seemed louder than usual. Every passing car made me glance toward the window. By the time I arrived at the diner, exhaustion weighed heavily on my shoulders. You look terrible, my coworker Megan announced immediately. Thank you. That is exactly what every woman wants to hear before coffee. She laughed. I tried to laugh too. The morning crowd kept me busy enough to push the note from my mind. Orders. Refills. Smiles. Normal things. Then shortly after noon, a familiar black sedan parked across the street. My stomach dropped. Vincent stepped out a moment later. He entered the diner wearing a dark coat and that same calm expression that never revealed very much. Yet today something seemed different. More serious. More focused. He slid into a booth while I carried over a cup of coffee. You came all the way here for coffee? I asked. The coffee is terrible. I almost smiled. Then why are you here? His grey eyes met mine. You. The answer hit harder than it should have. Before I could respond, he placed a folder on the table. What is that? Information. I sat across from him and opened it. Inside were photographs. Security images. Notes. Addresses. My pulse quickened. Vincent? Someone has been watching locations connected to me. His voice remained steady. The diner appeared on that list 2 days ago. A chill ran through me. Because of me. He hesitated. That was answer enough. I closed the folder slowly. For the first time since all of this started, fear became something real. Not because of the note. Not because of the stranger at the grocery store. Because Vincent looked genuinely worried. And somehow that frightened me more than anything else. Then he reached across the table and gently placed his hand over mine. His expression softened. You ran toward me when everyone else stepped back. His voice dropped lower. Now it is my turn. My heart skipped once. Hard. Because for the first time, I believed him. After that afternoon, something changed between us. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just enough for me to notice. Vincent stopped treating me like someone he owed. He started treating me like someone he respected. Every morning, I would find myself checking my phone before work. Sometimes there was a message. Sometimes there was not. Yet knowing he might call somehow made difficult days easier. A week passed without another note. Then another. The fear slowly loosened its grip on my life. Autumn settled over Chicago. Trees turned gold and copper. Cold wind swept through the city streets. For the first time since the night at the diner, I allowed myself to believe everything might be okay. Then Vincent invited me to lunch. It is not a date, he said immediately. Good, I replied. Because that would be strange. A pause followed. Extremely strange, he agreed. I smiled the entire drive to the restaurant. The place overlooked Lake Michigan. Large windows reflected sunlight across the water. It was the kind of restaurant I normally only saw in magazines. When I arrived, Vincent was already waiting. He stood when he saw me. Somehow that simple gesture felt more meaningful than any expensive gift he had ever sent. Lunch started awkwardly. Then surprisingly easy. We talked about ordinary things. My mother. His childhood. My favorite books. The terrible coffee at the diner. For nearly 2 hours, Vincent Romano looked less like the most feared man in Chicago and more like a man who had forgotten what normal conversation felt like. You laugh differently than everyone else around me, he said suddenly. I frowned. What does that mean? Most people laugh because they think they should. His grey eyes met mine. You laugh because something is actually funny. I nearly choked on my drink. That might be the strangest compliment I have ever received. It is the truth. The sincerity in his voice made my cheeks warm. For a moment, neither of us looked away. Then his phone buzzed. The atmosphere changed instantly. Vincent glanced at the screen. The warmth disappeared from his expression. Not completely. Just enough for me to notice. He silenced the phone without answering. Bad news? I asked. He hesitated. Complicated news. Related to me. Another pause. That was answer enough. My stomach tightened. Vincent leaned back in his chair and looked out toward the lake. There are some situations in my life I cannot always control. Nobody can. His gaze returned to mine. That is exactly the problem. The seriousness in his voice unsettled me. For several seconds, he seemed to be debating something internally. Then he spoke. Hannah, there is something I need you to know. My pulse quickened. Okay. The people responsible for what happened to me that night have been identified. Relief flooded through me. That is good news. Normally, yes. The way he said it erased my relief immediately. Outside, waves rolled against the shoreline beneath a grey autumn sky. Inside, the restaurant suddenly felt very quiet. Vincent stared at the untouched coffee in front of him before looking directly into my eyes. "The problem," he said softly, "is that they know exactly who saved me." The word stayed with me long after lunch ended. They know exactly who saved me. Vincent tried to reassure me afterward. He arranged extra security near my apartment building. He checked in every day. Sometimes twice. Yet none of that changed the fact that my ordinary life had become connected to a world I never asked to enter. Strangely, the fear did not last. Not because the situation improved. Because I started seeing something I had missed before. Vincent was afraid too. Not for himself. For me. That realization changed everything. Winter arrived early in Chicago. The first snowstorm covered the city in white and transformed familiar streets into something almost magical. One evening, Vincent invited me to a community event at a neighborhood center. The same center his foundation had quietly supported for years. Families filled the building. Children decorated holiday ornaments. Volunteers served hot chocolate. Laughter echoed through every hallway. It was impossible to feel afraid there. Watching Vincent move through the crowd was almost surreal. People greeted him warmly. Elderly volunteers hugged him. Children ran toward him without hesitation. This was not the version of Vincent the newspapers described. This was the man behind the reputation. The man few people ever saw. "You look surprised," he said as we stood near a Christmas tree decorated with handmade ornaments. "I am." He smiled. "Why?" I looked around the room. "Because none of this matches the stories." His expression softened. People usually believe the loudest stories. I thought about that for a moment. Then I laughed quietly. I almost did too. For the first time, Vincent looked genuinely happy. Not relieved. Not grateful. Happy. Later that evening, the center director stepped onto a small stage to thank donors and volunteers. The room filled with applause. Then something unexpected happened. "There is one person we would also like to recognize tonight," the director announced. Confused, I looked around. A woman whose actions changed more lives than she realizes. My stomach dropped. Vincent glanced at me and smiled. Suddenly every person in the room was looking in my direction. "No," I whispered. Vincent's smile widened. "Yes." He rushed into my face as the director continued. "Several months ago, a waitress chose compassion when everyone else chose distance. That single decision set many good things in motion." The room erupted into applause. I wanted to disappear beneath the floor. Instead, I found myself standing while hundreds of strangers smiled at me. Then Vincent stepped forward. The room gradually quieted. His gaze found mine immediately. "Most people think courage looks dramatic," he said. "They think it arrives with speeches and attention." The room listened carefully. But the bravest person I have ever met was simply kind when she had every reason not to be. Tears burned behind my eyes. Vincent took a slow breath. The night my life changed, one person ran toward a stranger while everyone else stepped back. Complete silence filled the room. That person was Hannah Brooks. My vision blurred. Not because of the applause. Not because of the attention. Because I finally understood. This was never a story about a powerful man being saved. It was a story about a man learning why kindness mattered. Vincent stepped closer. His voice softened. "You saved my life." I smiled through tears. "You already thanked me." He shook his head gently. "No." His grey eyes held mine. Warm. Honest. Certain. "You saved the life I was living. Then you showed me how to build a better one." And standing beneath the glow of holiday lights while snow fell beyond the windows, I realized that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with nothing more than one ordinary act of kindness.